And so today we're all here for the pop-up live presentation series. This episode is called um, Typical Feeding and Swallowing Development. So you're in the right place. A little housekeeping before we get started. The presentation portion of today's gathering will be recorded and shared on the Wisconsin Resource YouTube page shortly after today's presentation, probably within a day or two. So keep an eye out for that. We do not record the Q&A session that follows. The second half an hour of today's presentation is a Q&A. We don't record that. That's because we want you all to feel free to ask any questions you wish to ask without being recorded for other people to watch. To cut down on background noise, please keep your microphone turned off during this first half hour presentation portion, and that's so that recording is as good as it can be. If you can keep your cameras on, though, that's great. It's nice for Rachel to have someone to talk to rather than just a bunch of blank boxes. So if you're in a place you can have your camera on, we would appreciate it. If you need clarification on anything during the presentation portion of today's gathering, go ahead and put that in the chat. The resource team will be monitoring that chat and kind of handling those questions and comments. And then we always like to give a little disclaimer. While Wisconsin Resource welcomes our guest speakers wholeheartedly, we don't necessarily agree or disagree with the information they share. Typically, when something shows up on our website, for instance, it's gone through a whole vetting process with our research and review team. That is not the case as much with these pop-up presentations. But honestly, I don't think anything that Rachel is sharing with us today is very controversial. So I think we're good on that front. So I will now take the opportunity to wholeheartedly and enthusiastically introduce our speaker today. Rachel is a speech therapist right here from Wisconsin's Early Intervention Program. That's really exciting for us too to welcome a speaker who is right from our own system. We're so proud of her. She has been with Early Intervention for 4 years, like I said, in the Milwaukee Birth to Three program in Penfield in particular. With that said, she has also worked with feeding and swallowing across the lifespan. So she comes to us with a wealth of knowledge. And then we're excited to also share that she leads a feeding mentorship group as well. So if you want more information about that, I'm sure Rachel would be happy to share that with you. So welcome, Rachel. We're excited to hear from you today.
Thank you so much for the introduction. I'm excited too. And if you're already a part of my feeding mentorship group, this information will sound familiar as well. So, when I started this out, I really thought like, where's the best place to start? And that is just with typical feeding and swallowing development from birth to three. So we'll just get right into it and start talking about, first of all, the difference between feeding versus swallowing. I feel like it's used interchangeably a lot of the time. But what are they? Like, what is the difference between the two? And you can go to the next slide. So, feeding is the term for supplying someone with nourishment, and the term feeding includes all aspects of eating or drinking, including gathering and preparing food and liquid for intake, sucking or chewing and swallowing. It can also be achieved by non-oral routes like a G tube or an NG tube. Feeding provides children and caregivers with opportunities for communication and social experiences that form the basis for future interactions. I think that's super important, especially when we're talking about birth to three and we're looking at the whole child. Feeding is not just about nutrition, it's about all the emotions and the bonding that comes with it as well. And then swallowing is the very complex skill during which you use saliva, liquids, and foods. They're transported from your mouth into your stomach while keeping the airway protected. This is an integration of 6 cranial nerves and over 30 muscles responsible for swallowing and ensures the precise coordination required to safely and effectively transport foods and liquids. So that's the part where, when we talk about phases of the swallow, keeping kids safe while they're chewing and swallowing and keeping them from like choking or aspirating. That's what we're talking about when we talk about swallowing. And, we can't talk about everything that goes into feeding and swallowing in birth to three. We would be here a very long time. So today is just going to focus on feeding and swallowing milestones for children birth to three. And these are for kids who are typically developing and born full term. There are a number of skills that children are already working on before they're even born. And so prematurity, when that's thrown into the mix, that can complicate things further. But for the sake of time, we're just going to talk about a typical full-term infant and toddler. So, for every age range, we're going to talk about what the child can do and what they can eat. And then I'm just going to bring this up now. I know we have a link to share with everyone for IDDSI. IDDSI is a great resource that I reference quite a bit. The IDDSI is the International Dysphagia Diet Standardization Initiative. It's a nonprofit that has tried to standardize feeding or textures and liquids. So, like if you're like me and you remember school, we talked about things like, purees, thin liquids, and things like that. This is an organization that tries to standardize and also um, measure those textures so that, if you get five people in a room and you're talking about level 0 or level 1, we know that we're all talking about the same thing. Because, a puree to me might be different to a parent or, a grandmother. And so I feel like this is just a really great neutral way to speak about textures and really educate families when you're talking to them about the textures you want their kids to have. So every food or beverage that a child can eat on these slides will be paired with their IDDSI level, and then you can go to the link and see the handouts that they have available. Um, and so for the 0 to 3 month old, things that they can do, they can turn their head towards a nipple and open their mouth. They'll latch to the nipple, and this could be for a breast or bottle. And they coordinate their suck, swallow, and breathe. These are all reflexes, and what they can eat is either human milk or formula.
Rachel, I will open up
Okay,
that link
perfect.
and we can talk through it.
So, when you go to this website, they'll have a bunch of handouts for adults and pediatrics. And if you go down to the pediatric section and click on 0, oh, and they have it in a lot of different languages too, which is great. Um, so it talks about like what the thickness level is, what it should look like. So for example, flow like water can flow through a straw or teat or nipple. And then it talks about they do a flow test with a syringe, a fork, or a spoon. And I think if you go down further, it'll give you pictures of what that would look like. So for 0, it has a syringe, but and it gives you the recommendation for how to measure it. So this one recommends that you use a 10 milliliter syringe to check to make sure that you have the correct thickness level. Using the instructions they have for thicker textures, they'll show a fork or a spoon and how it should look. Like what will happen? Like, does it flow off? Does it stay on the spoon? If you shake the spoon, what happens? So it's a really great way to teach parents about the different textures and uh, as far and thicknesses as far as liquids and solids go. And then when we go to 4 to 6 months, a lot is changing. Babies may begin showing signs of readiness for starting solids, which would include reaching and grabbing items to bring to their mouths, them being able to hold their head upright and steady, showing interest in what you are eating, and can sit up with minimal support. I would say that, physicians and pediatricians, they start telling parents at 4 months to start feeding them solids sometimes, and sometimes that's just not the case. You really want to wait for these readiness skills to be a parent before you do start giving them solids. If you look online, there's tons of cute little videos on YouTube of kids who are ready to eat, and you see them like trying to bite things off their parents' spoons or plates and things like that. So I really recommend maybe going on YouTube and just looking up like toddlers or 6 month olds ready to eat. But as long as they can do all four of those things, you're ready to start trying solids. But generally, I feel like that happens closer to the 6 month mark. And again, like if this is a child with a disability or a delay, we would do things a little differently. But for a typically developing infant, we would wait until the 4 to 6 months range when they have all of those signs of readiness. Their main source of nutrition continues to be bottle or breast, and I will reinforce that on every slide because it's super important. Once they start solids, they start moving their tongue from front to back. So once they start solids, they'll start moving their tongue from the front of their mouth to the back to swallow. So you'll start to see their tongue thrust reflex begin to disappear. The tongue thrust is really what they use to help with bottle or breast drinking, but it'll start to disappear once you introduce solids, and they will start opening their mouth to accept the spoon. And then when they do begin to try solids, there are three different approaches. There's baby-led weaning, traditional or spoon-fed weaning, or a combination of the two. So at this age, they should be eating they should be eating human milk or formula. That's still their primary source of nutrition and hydration. Smooth purees or infant cereal with no lumps or chunks, and that would be IDDSI levels 3 and 4. And then if you are interested in baby-led weaning or the family is interested in baby-led weaning, I really like the Solid Starts website and app. Um, and we'll go to it to show you what it looks like. Again, it's not for everybody, and that's totally fine, but I think it's a really great place to start. So they have this free database that if you download their app, um, they have access to this as well. There's some things you can pay for, but you don't have to pay for anything specific. This is free. You can go to any food, like bananas. It gives you an age suggestion, whether it's if it's iron rich or not, if it's a common allergen. And if you scroll down, it gives you more information. The thing that I love about it is every food comes with a picture for how to cut a banana for babies. So 6 months, 9 months, and 18 months for this one. Um, and then they'll have videos closer to the bottom or additional pictures with how it looks compared to your hand or like compared to a penny or a quarter or something like that. And they'll also have videos of kids in the different age ranges trying the food so you can see what it looks like when a child is eating it. So I really love using their videos and their information. They also talk about if it's a choking hazard. And they could just give lots of really good info on each food, and I find them very culturally inclusive. They'll have everything from like black beans to chicken feet or lotus root, and it's created by a group of feeding specialists, so OTs, dietitians, pediatricians, speech therapists. So I find it to be a really great resource, and everyone has a smartphone and apps these days, so it's really nice to share it with families to use on their own. All right. And then we're going to move on to 6 to 9 months. So this is when kids start to pick up foods. They start picking up utensils with their hands and fingers. You might see them use a raking grasp, and moving into a pincer grasp. I think this is also where I really like to say like feeding skills are reflected. They're a reflection of fine motor and gross motor skills too. So they don't develop in isolation, especially with typical toddlers. You see them reflecting each other. So they start to use fine motor skills that reflect the types of foods they can eat. So if they can pick it up on their own, they're usually safe for that food. But if they, like for example, don't have a pincer grasp yet, they wouldn't be safe with small bite-sized foods that they'd have to pick up with their fingers. And I think that's just another, way feeding is such a multidisciplinary, area of development. But this is when they start being more interested in feeding themselves. They'll start to drink from an open or a straw cup with some help. They're drooling less. They're going to start moving food around their mouth with their tongue. So moving their tongue side to side, to move food to their biting surfaces, if not teeth, then gums. And then you see a munching pattern emerge, and that's when your mouth moves up and down like that. Um, what can they eat? Again, human milk or formula is their main source of nutrition and hydration. They can have water, some water, as they practice using cups, but the water that they're using for skill development is not going to take the place of the hydration they're getting from their formula or breast milk. There's just some things going on nutritionally that we don't want to kind of mix up what they need to be getting from their formula or milk. So water is just for skill development. Smooth purees and or purees with some lumps. Those are the levels 3, 4, and 5. Soft chewable foods cut into strips, which is IDDSI level 6, and some transitional foods. Those are the foods that you find like in the baby aisle or the toddler aisle at stores where they have like those, dissolvable crackers, dissolvable teething crackers. Those are like those transitional foods. When we get to 9 to 12 months, they're starting to feed themselves with their fingers. They're holding spoons. They'll hold a bottle or a sippy or straw cup with both of their hands. They might take a small bite from a larger piece of food. They'll have an emerging rotary chew. That's like a cow chewing their cud, where you're kind of moving your mouth in a circular motion, and how most adults eat. Um, Formula and human milk is still the main source of nutrition up until their first birthday, or I say to defer to their pediatrician. Um, so what can they eat? Again, the human milk or formula, some water as they practice using cups, smooth purees and or purees with lumps, the soft chewable food cut into strips, and now we're adding soft bite-sized foods. And then as they're getting older and their skills develop, you will see them gradually taking in less formula and milk, and their intake of solids increase. So we're not really forcing anything. They're kind of naturally reducing the amount or the quantity they have in bottles as their skills develop and they're taking in more solids. Then when we get to the 12 to 18 month mark, they're feeding themselves with their utensils or fingers. They drink from a sippy or straw cup without help. They can drink from an open cup without spilling. Most of the time, I think that's generous, but they're probably still going to be a little messy. Um, they can move their tongue from side to side to move food around in their mouth. And what can they eat? Now they're eating regular textures or foods made of mixed consistencies, which is level 7. And then they're no longer relying on formula, but they can still have human milk. The human milk you can have for a lot longer. It's probably not the main source of nutrition. That's another pop-up or another lesson, but they can also have whole or plant milks and water. From 18 to 24 months, they are able to drink from a small open cup with minimal spilling. They're consistently chewing foods on both sides of their mouth. They're moving food around their mouth, chewing and swallowing without spilling. And they can eat foods that require more chewing, like chicken breasts, like drier or tougher to eat foods. You would want to continue cutting the challenging foods into smaller pieces, or maybe like adding a sauce, something to make it a little bit easier. And they're still having human milk, whole or plant milks, and water. And then finally, when we get to the 2 to 3 years, they're just getting more and more independent. They're feeding themselves with their fork and spoon, although they're often still using their fingers, just because it's more efficient and it's easier. They drink from an open cup without spilling. And again, all those cups we talked about previously, like the sippy or the straw cups, and they're able to eat and chew all foods, even tougher textures, without gagging or choking. They can have most crunchy or harder mixed foods, but you would want to still avoid offering foods that carry a higher choking risk, such as popcorn, hot dogs, or grapes, and continue to cut those more difficult foods into smaller pieces. This is another place where I really like the Solid Starts app. You can go and see like those high choking hazard foods, and they have really nice visuals that I think are easy to understand for parents or caregivers about those more difficult foods or risky foods. And then, of course, they're continuing to have human milk, whole or plant milks, and water. Um, And yeah, hopefully I didn't go through it too fast. And I hope this was helpful for everybody. Again, like we could be here for years probably to talk about feeding, but just getting down those like basics of what we expect, I think is super important at this age.
Absolutely. Thank you, Rachel, for running through those developmental milestones around feeding and swallowing. I think another thing to take from today's presentation are those couple of resources that you shared. Um, After you shared them with me, I spent quite a lot of time in there looking around and I learned a ton during that time. So,
Awesome. I'm glad to hear it.